Tim Berners-Lee, the visionary who gave the world the web. Origins: A Curious Mind is Born. In the soft light of a summer morning on the 8th of June, 1955, a child was born in London who would one day connect billions of people across the globenaut by voice, not by touch, but through an invisible thread of information. This child was named Timothy John Berners-Lee. Both of his parents were mathematicians, and not just any mathematicians. Mary Lee Woods and Conway Berners-Lee had worked on the Ferranti Mark I, the world's first commercially available general-purpose digital computer. It was perhaps no coincidence that their child would later go on to build a structure that would house the information of the modern world. From the very beginning, Tim was immersed in an environment of logic, problem-solving, and innovation. Dinner conversations often revolved around binary logic and early computing theories. The household didn't just have books, it had puzzles, games, and gadgets. From early on, Tim showed a keen interest in understanding how things worked, taking apart radios and electronics just to reassemble them better. Childhood and school days. Tim's early education was shaped by Sheen Mount Primary School, followed by Emmanuel School, a private school in southwest London. Though he wasn't particularly social or inclined toward sports, he exhibited a deep fascination with trains, electronics, and logical systems. He built his first computer using a soldering iron, an old television, and some spare parts. But it wasn't just machines that intrigued Tim. It was the idea of interconnectivity. He often thought about how things were related, how data flowed, how systems talked to each other. These thoughts were seeds that would one day grow into the digital fabric of our interconnected world. Oxford years, the spark of independence. In 1973, Tim entered the Queen's College at the University of Oxford, where he studied physics. While at Oxford, he wasn't the typical studious loner. Instead, he explored computing as an act of creative rebellion. Along with a friend, he built a computer using an old Motorola microprocessor and soldered it together himself. This was no class project. It was driven by curiosity and a desire to understand the why behind the what. He was temporarily banned from using the university computer because he and a friend had been caught hacking it not maliciously, but because they were exploring its inner workings. It was a defining moment. Tim had already begun to see computer systems not as endpoints, but as universes waiting to be mapped. A career begins programming with purpose. After graduating in 1976, Tim held various jobs that would help shape his understanding of real-world computing. He worked at Plessey Telecommunications, where he learned about distributed computing. Later, at DG Nash Limited, he wrote software for printers and other devices. His work often involved connecting different systems, using various programming languages, and developing communication protocols. Without realizing it, Tim was already forming the mental scaffolding for the wave of vision of a world where machines could communicate seamlessly. But it wasn't until 1980, when he took a 6-month consultancy job at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, that the first real opportunity to make a global impact would emerge, the genesis of the World Wide Web. In the spring of 1980, the sprawling campus of CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, hummed with the excitement of scientific discovery. Tim Berners-Lee had just arrived for a 6-month consulting job. His assignment was clear but uninspiring on the surface. Organize information for the thousands of physicists and researchers at CERN who were drowning in data scattered across systems and machines. But to Tim, the challenge was thrilling. It was exactly the kind of problem that had fascinated him since childhood: how to make disconnected things talk to each other. At CERN, he saw firsthand how frustrating it was for scientists to access technical documents stored across multiple incompatible systems. Every department, every team, Every individual seemed to have their own structure, their own format, their own computer system. There was no universal way to retrieve, share, or even locate information. It was as if every room in a massive library had a different language and a different filing cabinet. Tim Berners-Lee, ever the system thinker, began to dream of a web of interconnected documents. During that first stint at CERN, Tim created a prototype system he called Inquire, short for Inquire Within Upon Everything, the title of a Victorian-era book his parents owned. Inquire allowed users to create nodes of information and link them in a web-like structure. While primitive, it contained the essential DNA of what would become the World Wide Web: linked documents, hierarchical and non-linear relationships, decentralized knowledge mapping. Tim didn't know it yet, but he had created the first digital hypertext system that could be scalable. Tim left CERN after 6 months, but returned in 1984 as a fellow. By then, the computing landscape had evolved. The Internet was growing, and TCP/IP protocols were becoming standard. But the web, as we know it, didn't exist. It was a network of machines, not a network of ideas or documents. And therein lay the opportunity. Tim realized that if Inquire could be scaled and combined with TCP, IP, and a universal document formatting language, it could change everything. So, in March 1989, he wrote a groundbreaking proposal titled Information Management, a Proposal. The first sentence was modest, even apologetic. This proposal concerns the management of general information about accelerators and experiments at CERN. It discusses the problems of loss of information about complex evolving systems and introduces a solution. But beneath the dry academic tone was a revolutionary vision. Tim proposed a system that would allow documents to link to other documents across different machines, be accessible through a common interface, be decentralized, non-hierarchical, and open. His boss at CERN, Mike Sendall, famously scribbled on the proposal, "I'm vague but exciting." Despite the lukewarm initial reaction, Tim was granted time to develop a prototype. In late 1990, working with Robert Cailliot, a Belgian engineer at CERN, he began building the tools necessary for the web. HTML, a simple markup language to structure documents. HTTP, a protocol to transfer hypertext across computers. URL, a system to identify resources by addresses. By Christmas of 1990, the first web browser editor, called World Wide Web, and the first web server HTTPD were running on Tim's next computer. The first web page, hosted at info.cern.ch, explained what the web was and how to use it. The first website. Imagine a digital Rosetta Stone thief, first modern website in human history. It was simple, text only, and built with the goal of explaining itself. It read, "The World Wide Web, W3, is a wide-area hypermedia information retrieval initiative aiming to give universal access to a large universe of documents." What started as a humble proposal had blossomed into a doorway to the future. What made Tim's approach extraordinary was its simplicity and openness. Anyone could create a website. No centralized authority was needed to approve content. The protocols and formats were free for anyone to use. He resisted every attempt to patent or commercialize the web. While many tech companies would have seized the opportunity for profit, Tim insisted that the web must remain open, universal, and free. Throughout 1991 and 1992, Tim and his small team worked tirelessly to promote the web across the academic and tech communities. By 1993, the first graphical web browser, Mosaic, was released, and usage exploded. The web became a wildfire, spreading from physicists to programmers, from universities to entrepreneurs, and eventually to homes and phones across the planet. Tim Berners-Lee had not only built a tool, he had built an Idean ecosystem of knowledge, and he gave it to the world. I just had to take the hypertext idea and connect it to the TCP and DNS ideas, and ta-da, the World Wide Web. Creating the web was really an act of desperation, because the situation without it was very difficult when I was working at CERN. Most of the technology involved in the web, like the hypertext, like the internet, multi-font text objects, had all been designed already. I just had to put them together. Tim Berners-Lee. Building the foundations, HTML, HTTP, and URLs. As the early 1990s dawned, Tim Berners-Lee stood on the cusp of a digital renaissance. The outlines of his vision had been sketched with the Enquire system and the first World Wide Web prototype, but now it was time to lay the technical foundations. What he needed were the structural elements that would make the web accessible, resilient, and scalable. Tim's brilliance wasn't merely in inventing something new, it was in identifying what already worked, simplifying it, and weaving it into a cohesive structure that anyone could use. His tools would be open, flexible, and powerful. And they would rest on three seemingly simple, yet world-changing technologies: HTML, HTTP, URL. Together, they would form the bedrock of the World Wide Web. HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language, was not a programming language in the traditional sense. It was a markup language designed to structure content, not perform logic or computation. HTML was about simplicity. It had to be so simple that anyone could write it, scientists, journalists, even kids. Tim Berners-Lee. With HTML, users could define headers, paragraphs, and lists, insert images, create links between documents. At the heart of HTML was the anchor tag, a href URL link text A. This simple construct allowed hypertext, linking the ability to jump from one document to another with a single click. It turned the web into a web. Tim intentionally kept HTML small and intuitive. He wanted to democratize the web. You didn't need to be a programmer, you just needed a text editor and curiosity. To transport web pages, Tim created HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTP was designed to be lightweight, stateless, every request was treated independently, universal. It allowed a client, such as a browser, to request a document from a server using a GET request, and the server would respond by sending the content. This simplicity made it elegant and powerful. Over time, HTTP would evolve into more secure and complex versions like HTTPS with encryption layers, but the core idea remained. Communication between machines should be easy. URL, the universal identifier. What good is a document if you can't find it? Tim's answer was the URL Uniform Resource Locator. A URL provided protocol, e.g. HTTP, host, e.g. example.com, path, e.g. index.html. Each document on the web now had an address, like a home on a digital street. It didn't matter what machine it lived on or who owned it, as long as it had a URL, it could be reached. This opened the door to a decentralized web. Anyone could host content, anyone could link to it, there was no central gatekeeper. Design principles. Why the web succeeded. While many people focus on the technology, what truly set Tim's web apart were the principles behind the design. 1. Universality. The web should work on any device, any language, any operating system. No preference for hardware, company, or culture. Thus, decentralization. There should be no central controlling node. Anyone could host, access, or link to document. 3. Openness. The specifications for HTML, HTTP, and URLs were published openly. No patents, no proprietary restrictions. Cuatro. Simplicity. Everything was designed to be as simple as possible. The more people who could use and understand the web, the better. Early experiments. By 1990, Tim was testing these components on a NXT Computer high-end workstation designed by Steve Jobs after leaving Apple. He ran the first web server.httpd, the first browser, editor, World Wide Web, the first website, info.cern.chi. This NXT machine bore a historic label. This machine is a server. Do not power down. The experiments were successful. With HTML, HTTP, and URLs, Tim had created a complete ecosystem. Anyone could create a page, anyone could serve it, anyone could read it. First users and the rise of hypertext culture. At first, the web was mostly used by physicists. CERN distributed documentation and software. Developers across the world began contributing browsers, servers, and web tools. Notable developments. Viola www, an early graphical browser with tables and scripting. Midas, NASA's contribution for internal communication. Mosaic, developed at NCSA, it would bring the web to the masses. In 1993, Mark Andreessen and his team released Mosaic, the first graphical browser that could run on Windows and Mac. It was a tipping point. The web was no longer just a tool for scientists. It had become a platform for humanity. What made it revolutionary? Tim Berners-Lee's web was not the first attempt at hypertext or digital libraries. What made it revolutionary was that it used existing infrastructure, Internet, TCP, IP. It was free to use and extend. It encouraged contribution and connection. It scaled from a few pages to billions. He didn't just create a technical platform. He created a social movement, a cultural framework, and an ethical commitment to openness. The dream behind the web is of a common information space in which we communicate by sharing information. Its universality is essential. The web must be able to work with any form of information, be accessible to anyone, and support all cultures and people. Tim Berners-Lee. By 1994, there were over 2,000 websites. The web went from zero to a global communication network in under 5 years. Tim's innovations laid the foundation for e-commerce, social media, online learning, and more. CERN and the first website. In the grand halls of CERN, where physicists worked on unlocking the mysteries of the universe, another revolution was quietly taking place that would transform human communication forever. It didn't involve colliders or particle beams, but rather code, connectivity, and an idea whose time had come. By late 1990, Tim Berners-Lee had successfully designed the fundamental architecture of the World Wide Web. With HTML, HTTP, and URLs functioning in harmony on his NXT machine, the next step was to make it visible to the world, to publish a live, accessible website, and thus history would be made at a humble address: http://info.cern.ch/. The first server, a quiet giant. Tim's workstation at CERN became the world's first web server. It was powered by NextStep, an advanced operating system developed by Steve Jobs after his initial departure from Apple. The machine was as much a design marvel as it was functional. On its case, Tim attached a sticker that read, "This machine is a server. Do not power down." It was more than a cautionary label. It was a declaration. A new era had begun. The first website, a portal to the future. The content of the first website was modest in appearance but monumental in impact. It introduced users to what the World Wide Web was, how to use a browser, how to set up a server, how to write HTML, links to software and technical documentation. The homepage was pure text, no colors, no images, no ads. But in that simplicity lay the seed of every digital ecosystem that would follow blogs, search engines, social networks, e-commerce, Wikipedia, and more. Tim was not interested in branding or corporate dominance. His goal was empowerment through information. Building the web from scratch, CERN had thousands of researchers from around the world who needed to access and publish information. That made it the perfect incubator for the early web. Tim, working with colleagues like Robert Caliao, began promoting the new system internally. They trained others to set up their own pages, create links to scientific papers, build internal navigation. Soon, departments across CERN began building mini-sites, interlinked and accessible. Each new page added to a growing web of knowledge. And each new user became a contributor, not just a consumer. The web expands, going public. In 1991, the web went live to the public, initially to the academic and research communities. Word spread quickly through newsgroups and mailing lists. The code for the first browser and server was made freely available. Developers from around the world began building new browsers, Viola www, Airwise, line mode. New servers, tools to edit HTML. CERN's open approach driven by Tim's ideals meant that no one had to ask for permission to participate. By 1992, there were dozens of web servers, hundreds of websites, thousands of users, and more importantly, a global community had formed around a shared dream, design decisions that mattered. 1. No central authority. Unlike existing systems like CompuServe or AOL, the web wasn't controlled by a company. Anyone could host a page. Anyone could link to anyone else. 2. No editing bottleneck. Users didn't need approval or moderation. Tim trusted people to build responsibly. 3. Publishing made easy. With HTML, anyone could publish information without expensive tools or complex code. These decisions ensured that the web would scale, adapt, and evolve not as a product, but as a global conversation, a vision beyond science. Even though the initial use case was academic, Tim saw beyond. The web is not a network of computers. The web is a network of people. En visioned. Students learning from professors across oceans, families sharing photos and stories, doctors accessing medical data, activists organizing movements, artists showcasing creativity, and remarkably, all of that would come to pass thanks to the foundation he laid at CERN. Memorandum of Royalty-Free Access. In April 1993, CERN officially released the web into the public domain. It was a pivotal act of generosity. They issued a public declaration that the web's protocols would be free to use, free to implement, free to modify. This decision preserved the web as an open platform and ensured it would not be trapped behind paywalls, patents, or walled gardens. Had CERN decided otherwise, the modern web could have become a commercialized, fractured mess. Archiving the beginning. The original website at info.cern.ch was eventually lost due to technical migrations, but it has since been restored and archived, serving as a digital monument to a revolution. Visitors today can still see the plain text marvel that launched a billion websites. Tim built infrastructure for freedom, not profit. The web began as a tool for collaboration, not consumption. CERN's open release ensured humanity owned the web, not corporations. The early web was powered by trust, simplicity, and community, establishing the W3C, Guardians of the Web. By 1994, the World Wide Web had leapt from CERN's underground servers to college dorm rooms, newspaper headlines, and living rooms. Its simplicity and openness had made it irresistible. But that same openness, its greatest strength, was now facing a risk: chaos. Commercial interests, browser wars, and proprietary extensions were creeping in. If left unchecked, the web could fragment, with different companies creating incompatible versions of it. That would mean websites that worked in one browser but not another. Patents restricting developers. The end of a truly open web. Tim Berners-Lee knew something had to be done. He had built the web. Now he had to protect it. The need for standards. As the number of websites and browsers skyrocketed, so did inconsistencies. Some browsers supported certain HTML tags, others didn't. Companies began adding proprietary features without consulting anyone. The web risked becoming a battleground of formats and protocols. Tim believed deeply in interoperability, the idea that all systems should work together. He envisioned a world where any browser could access any page. Any person could build and publish content. Innovation could thrive without gatekeepers. To achieve that, the web needed a neutral body, a technical and ethical steward. And so, in October 1994, Tim launched the World Wide Web Consortium known, globally, as the W3C. What is the W3C? The World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, is a global standards organization. Its mission to lead the web to its full potential by developing protocols and guidelines that ensure long-term growth for the web. It was established at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in collaboration with INRIA, France, Keio University, Japan. Tim relocated to the U.S. to lead the effort from MIT. Principles of the W3C. Tim embedded core values into the W3C from day one. 1. Universality. The web must work for everyone. People with disabilities, people in remote areas, speakers of all languages. 2. Neutrality. The W3C would not be owned by any company. No single interest would dominate the process. 3. Transparency. All standards would be developed in public view with community input. 4. Technical excellence. Specifications would be grounded in sound engineering, not marketing hype. 5. Free to implement. All W3C standards would be royalty-free, ensuring that developers everywhere could use them. These principles turned the W3C into a lighthouse of ethics and engineering. Key standards from W3C. Over the years, the W3C has released and managed critical web standards, including standard description. HTML maintained and evolved as the core markup language of the web. CSS cascading style sheets used to style websites. XML extensible markup language for structured data exchange. DOM document object model interface for interacting with HTML, XML. WCAG Web Content Accessibility Guidelines to make the web usable by all, including people with disabilities. SVG Scalable Vector Graphics to support interactive graphics and animation. Each of these standards represents not just technical achievements, but also philosophical commitments to openness and inclusion. In the mid-90s, the web faced its first existential threat, the browser wars. Netscape and Microsoft Internet Explorer began adding proprietary features to HTML and JavaScript. Sites were being built to work only in one browser. This violated the web's foundational principle of universality. Tim and the W3C responded by promoting standard-compliant development, releasing validator tools to help developers follow best practices, advocating that browsers conform to standards, not invent their own. Tim became a diplomat for the web, traveling and speaking across the globe, urging unity over fragmentation. Community and working groups. Unlike traditional tech organizations, the W3C is collaborative. It includes engineers from tech companies, Google, Apple, Mozilla, etc., academics and researchers, accessibility experts, government and nonprofit representatives. Together, they form working groups, each focused on a specific area of the web, e.g., HTML, security, privacy, internationalization. All discussions, decisions, and drafts are public. This transparency builds trust-a-rarity in tech governance. Tim's role. Tim didn't just found the W3. Chase stayed deeply involved. As director of the W3C, he set the strategic direction, mediated conflicts between competing stakeholders, advocated for inclusion and ethical design. Despite his fame, he remained approachable, focused, and humble. Colleagues often described him as brilliant but always listening, a visionary who prefers collaboration over command. He didn't want to rule the web. He wanted to nurture it. Global impact. The W3C's work has shaped how browsers display content, how websites are built, how digital media is handled, how accessibility is defined and enforced. Without the W3C, the web might have become a patchwork of corporate fiefdoms. Instead, it remains a common platform for innovation, expression, and communication. A vision for a free and open web. By the dawn of the new millennium, the World Wide Web had become unavoidable. From homes and schools to hospitals and governments, the web transformed how the world communicated, learned, shopped, and organized. But as usage exploded, so did new challenges: centralization, surveillance, capitalism, and monopolistic control. Tim Berners-Lee, once a lone visionary, now found himself a guardian fighting for the soul of the web he had created. This wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about freedom, power, and human dignity in the digital age. The web as a mirror of society. Tim had always insisted that the web was a reflection of the people who built it. When it was created, it was built on trust, transparency, openness. But as companies rushed to monetize content, track users, and capture attention, Tim watched with unease. He saw websites filled with ads and trackers, companies harvesting user data without consent, search engines manipulating information for profit, social media fueling echo chambers and misinformation. The web, he feared, was becoming a platform of control, not liberation. The web is at a crossroads. We must decide, will it be a tool of empowerment or a system of manipulation? Tim Berners-Lee. Net neutrality, keeping the internet equal. Tim became a powerful voice in support of net neutrality, the principle that all internet traffic should be treated equally. He warned that without neutrality, telecom providers could throttle access to certain sites, companies could pay for fast lanes while competitors languished. Voices from poor, rural, or developing communities could be silenced. Tim worked with governments, nonprofit coalitions, and activists to testify before legislative bodies, publish open letters, mobilize developers and digital rights groups. The web, he said, must not become a cable television system with packages, restrictions, and censorship. Data privacy, the fight for user control. Another core belief of Tim's was that users should control their data, not corporations. By the mid-2000s, this ideal was under siege. Social networks profiled users to sell targeted ads. Tech companies collected location, search, purchase, and message histories. Users had no clear way to access, delete, or move their data. Tim responded with renewed urgency. He launched educational campaigns on data rights. He urged platforms to adopt data portability and consent frameworks. He called for legislation that prioritized users over advertisers. The Web We Want, a global campaign. In 2013, Tim launched the global initiative, The Web We Want. It was a movement to define a Bill of Rights for the web, encourage governments to commit to internet freedom, push for transparency in online surveillance and censorship, Backed by the Web Foundation, this initiative gained global support from NGOs, educators, developers, youth organizations. Tim traveled the world speaking to students, heads of state, and journalists, sharing a common message. The web is not just code, it's a public utility. It belongs to all of us. The digital divide. Tim also addressed global inequality in web access. While the web changed lives in developed nations, billions of people remained offline. Tim argued that access to the internet is a human right. Governments must prioritize digital infrastructure. Developers must build tools for low bandwidth, low literacy environments. He supported projects like Internet for All, World Economic Forum, Alliance for Affordable Internet, local web literacy initiatives. He emphasized that true digital equity requires more than device it, requires inclusion, language support, and cultural respect, open source and open standards. Another battleground for Tim was the defense of open source technologies. He encouraged developers to release code under open licenses, companies to build on open APIs and transparent algorithms, governments to adopt open data policies. Tim believed that innovation thrived in ecosystems, not empires. Open source is not just about cost, it's about collaboration, trust, and freedom. Tim Berners-Lee, speaking truth to power. Despite being revered as the web's inventor, Tim never hesitated to criticize big tech. He spoke out against data monopolies, election manipulation via social platforms, targeted disinformation, dark patterns that trick users. He often warned, these are not bugs, they are business models. In forums from TED Talks to the United Nations, Tim called for new regulatory frameworks, algorithmic transparency, ethical tech education. He understood that the battle for the web's soul was as much about policy and culture as it was about code. Tim's ethical framework. Tim's vision of the web rests on 5 ethical pillars. Access. Everyone should have the right to connect. Privacy. Data belongs to individuals, not platforms. Openness. Standards must be open and royalty-free. Decentralization. Power must not be concentrated. Participation. The web must amplify diverse voices. This framework is now taught in universities, adopted by NGOs, and echoed by tech leaders around the globe. The Contract for the Web. In 2019, Tim launched the Contract for the Web, a groundbreaking set of commitments from governments, companies, citizens. Its purpose to protect the open web as a public good and a basic right for everyone. Principles included universal internet access, respect for privacy and data rights, combating online hate and misinformation, supporting civic engagement online. Over 1,000 organizations signed on, including Microsoft, Google, the French government, Digital Rights Group. The contract was not legally binding, but it was morally powerful, rooted in Tim's enduring influence, honors, awards, and global recognition. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the world began to understand just how revolutionary Tim Berners-Lee's invention truly was. The World Wide Web had become the nervous system of civilization, connecting people, ideas, economies, and cultures across borders. But while billionaires emerged from the digital gold rush, Tim remained humble, uncommercialized, and driven by principle. He didn't patent the web. He didn't build a startup. He didn't trademark his name. Instead, he kept working leading the W3C, speaking out on digital ethics and mentoring a new generation of technologists. Still, the world would not let his contributions go unrecognized. The Turing Award, the Nobel of Computing. In 2016, Tim Berners-Lee was awarded the ACM-AM Turing Award, highest honor in computer science, often called the Nobel Prize of Computing. The citation read, "For inventing the World Wide Web, the first web browser, and the fundamental protocols and algorithms allowing the web to scale. It was a fitting tribute, but when accepting the award, Tim didn't dwell on his past achievements. He used the platform to issue a warning. The web is under threat. We must fight to keep it open, inclusive, and fair. Knighted by the Queen. In 2004, Tim received one of Britain's highest honors. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, becoming Sir Timothy John Berners-Lee, K.B.A., Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire. The ceremony took place at Buckingham Palace. When asked by journalists how it felt to be knighted, Tim responded with characteristic modesty. "I'm just glad people find the web useful." Other prestigious awards? Over the years, Tim received dozens of major awards, including Award Year Description, Millennium Technology Prize 2004 from the Finnish government for technological innovation that benefits humanity, Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering 2013 for groundbreaking engineering innovation, Japan Prize 2002 for contributions to IT and improving society, Prince of Asturias Award for Scientific and Technical Research 2002, one of Spain's highest international honors, Presidential Medal of Freedom, USA nominated, but declined by Tim due to ethical concerns about the administration's policies. He was also named to Time magazine's 100 Most Important People of the 20th Century, the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council, foreign member of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Fellow of the Royal Society, FRS, honorary degrees and academic distinctions. Universities around the world celebrated Tim's contribution to knowledge and education. He received honorary degrees from Harvard, Oxford, Yale, MIT, ETH Zurich, University of Manchester, University of Tokyo, Tsinghua University, China, and over 20 others worldwide. These were more than ceremonial. They often came with keynotes, mentorship events, and student Q&A sessions. Tim always used the moment to inspire young minds, recognition in popular culture. Though not a celebrity by nature, Tim occasionally appeared in documentaries, e.g., The Internet's Own Boy, The Web at 30, interviews, e.g., BBC Hard Talk, Wired, TED Talks, dramatizations and animations about the Internet's origin. In 2012, during the London Olympics opening ceremony, Tim made a surprise appearance on stage, sitting at a Next computer. He tweeted live from the stadium, "This is for everyone." The message was illuminated across the arena, broadcast to billions. It was a global declaration of his lifelong values: equality, access, and service. Humility in the face of praise. Despite all the accolades, Tim remained grounded. He often refused interviews that tried to paint him as a tech god or genius. He corrected reporters when they overstated his role. The web was built by many. I just happened to put the pieces together. He turned down massive speaking fees if the audience didn't align with his mission. He even declined some awards when they were linked to regimes or corporations he considered unethical. To Tim, recognition was never about ego. It was about reminding people of the web's original promise, honors that serve a mission. Tim used his awards not just as trophies, but as leverage. He used keynote stages to advocate for web access in developing countries, warn of data abuses and digital monopolies, promote ethics in software engineering, recruit allies for the contract for the web. Each medal, ribbon, and trophy became a stepping stone to another campaign for a better digital world. Battles against data exploitation, the rise of Solid. As the world entered the 2010s, the web that Tim Berners-Lee had gifted to humanity was now deeply enmeshed in everyday life socially, politically, economically, but with that integration came deep unease. The web was no longer just an information space, it had become a marketplace for data, with users as the product. Tech giants harvested every click, swipe, and search. Complex algorithms predicted behavior, manipulated choices, and shaped elections. Privacy was no longer assumed, but traded. For Tim Berners-Lee, this was not evolution, it was betrayal. The web was supposed to empower individuals, not enable a surveillance economy. Tim Berners-Lee. And so, he did what visionaries do. He went back to the drawing board. The age of surveillance capitalism. Tim watched as the most popular websites and services became data silos. Social media platforms tracked not only what users posted, but what they clicked even off-platform. Ad networks stitched together user identities across devices, locations, and apps. Apps requested more permissions than necessary and sold that data to brokers. The result? Behavioral profiling, micro-targeted advertising, manipulated news feeds. People were losing control over their own lives and didn't even realize it. The Cambridge Analytica scandal, a tipping point. In 2018, a whistleblower revealed that Cambridge Analytica, a political consulting firm, had harvested data from over 87 million Facebook users without consent. This data was used to create psychological profiles, deliver targeted political ads, potentially sway elections around the world. For Tim, this was a wake-up call for the public. If we don't change the way the web works now, we may lose it entirely. The birth of Solid. In response, Tim launched an ambitious project. Solid, short for Social Linked Data. Solid was not just a tool. It was a new architecture for the web. Its mission? To give every user control over their data, identity, and digital life. How Solid works. At the heart of Solid is the idea of a pod, personal online data store. Here's how it functions. User-owned pods. All your data photos, medical records, contacts, likes, comments is stored in a pod you control. You can host it yourself or use a trusted provider. Granular permissions. You decide who can access your data and for how long. Permissions are revocable at any time. App interoperability. Apps don't store your data. They request access to your pod, like visitors borrowing a book. If you switch apps, your data stays with you. Decentralization. No central server controls your identity or content. This shifts the power dynamic from corporations back to individuals. Solid at MIT and Inrupt. To make Solid a reality, Tim launched a research collaboration at MIT, a private company called Inrupt, where he serves as CTO. Inrupt's mission is to build developer tools for Solid, partner with governments and companies, accelerate adoption of personal data pods. We're not building an app, we're building a new web. Tim Berners-Lee, the philosophy behind Solid. Tim's goal is to re-decentralize the web. His core beliefs embedded in Solid: data sovereignty. You own your data. User consent. Nothing should be accessed without permission. Interoperability. Apps should work across systems. Accountability. Providers must earn your trust. This isn't nostalgia. It's about modern ethics in digital architecture. Use cases in global adoption. Solid is being explored in healthcare. Patients control their health records and share with doctors as needed. Education. Students own their academic records and learning histories. Smart cities. Residents decide how their location and activity data is used. Social platforms. Users can port their friends, posts, and photos between apps. Governments in Flanders, Belgium, United Kingdom, Singapore have begun pilot programs to integrate Solid with public digital services. Compatibility with web standard. One of Tim's strategic decisions was to ensure Solid was built on top of existing web protocols, including HTTP, TLS, RDF, Resource Description Framework, WebID for authentication. This ensures that Solid is not a replacement for the WebBut, a layer of ethical control atop it. Developer ecosystem. Solid is open source, and the community has grown steadily. Thousands of developers have built authentication systems, pod providers, profile management tools, messaging and storage apps. Events like Solid World, hackathons, and community labs fuel collaboration. Tim remains deeply involved, coding, advising, and guiding architecture. Challenges and resistance. Solid's vision is revolutionary, but adoption is slow. Challenges include complexity for non-tech users, entrenched interests from data-driven corporations, lack of incentives for existing apps to adopt the model, but Tim is patient. It took the web several years to take off. Solid is a long game. Philosophy, personal values, and legacy. In an age dominated by tech moguls and digital empires, Sir Tim Berners-Lee stands apart not just as a creator, but as a guardian of values. His legacy lies not only in lines of code or protocols, but in the philosophy that has guided his every decision. He is a living example that technology, when guided by ethics and humility, can elevate humanity. Rooted in curiosity, guided by purpose, Tim's journey began with childhood curiosity, but from an early age, he believed that knowledge should be shared, organized, accessible to everyone. This belief wasn't academic, it was moral. He saw the web not as a product, but as a public service akin to libraries, electricity, or roads. It existed to empower, not to extract. Personal beliefs. Though intensely private, Tim has spoken about his core values. 1. Humanism. He believes in the inherent dignity of every person. The web must reflect that by amplifying marginalized voices, not silencing them. 2. Non-commercialism. He has repeatedly refused to monetize the web or Solid. For him, freedom trumps profit. 3. Democracy, equality. The web should be a level playing field where a student in Uganda has the same access as a CEO in Silicon Valley. 4. Privacy as a right. He views privacy not as a luxury, but a digital human right. 5. Transparency and accountability. Code should be open, algorithms auditable, and decisions contestable. Personal life and character. Tim Berners-Lee is a father, husband, and partner to fellow technologist Rosemary Leith, a fan of railways and model trains. A keen sailor, he finds clarity in water and silence. Despite global fame, he leads a modest, largely offline life. He does not chase media attention. He reads widely, walks often, and thinks deeply. Colleagues describe him as quiet but sharp, ethically relentless, unmoved by ego. He is often the last to speak in a meeting, not because he lacks ideas, but because he listens. Leadership style. Tim leads by consensus, not command, vision, not hierarchy, encouragement, not pressure. At W3C and in Rupt, he prefers collaborative environments where junior voices are heard. He empowers teams to build ethically, always returning to a simple question: are we doing what's best for users? Vision of the web. For Tim, the web is more than technology. It's a cultural mirror, a platform for global collaboration, a canvas for human creativity. He worries about disinformation, surveillance, digital colonialism, when one country or company controls others' data, but he also believes in redemption. He thinks the web can correct itself if we choose to steer it right. Legacy in the tech world. Tim has inspired thousands of developers to pursue open source, digital rights advocates to push for privacy laws, policymakers to think beyond profit, young innovators to see technology as a force for good. His influence appears in privacy laws like GDPR, open data initiatives, digital public infrastructure across the developing world. His moral DNA is invisible but everywhere. Quotes that define his ethos: "We can't just assume the web will be okay. We have to fight for it. The web is not a finished product. It's an ongoing creation built by all of us. What matters is not the tool, but what you do with it. When we connect people, we must do so with dignity, not for manipulation." Teaching and mentorship. Tim is a professor at MIT and Oxford, where he teaches semantic web, linked data, internet ethics. But more importantly, he mentors. He responds to student emails. He reviews code. He joins community calls. To him, education is continuity, ensures the web survives with values intact. The future of the web and his continuing mission. The web is no longer a newborn invention. It is an evolving, living ecosystem shaped by billions. And while the modern web bears little resemblance to the static pages of 1991, Tim Berners-Lee is still right at its heart, not as a relic of the past, but as an architect of the future. As of today, Tim is still building, still warning, and still dreaming of a web that honors the dignity of its users. We're just at the beginning of what the web can become. I still believe in its promise. What is Web 3.0? In recent years, a new term has entered popular discourse: Web 3.0, the next evolution of the web. Though definitions vary, Tim's interpretation is clear: a semantic web where machines understand content, a decentralized web where users own data, an ethical web where privacy, interoperability, and trust are default. Unlike the hype-driven blockchain Web 3 movement, Tim's Web 3.0 is a philosophy, not a marketing term. He's not interested in coins or speculation. He's interested in restoring user agency. The web of data. Semantic web. One of Tim's earliest dreams was the semantic web, where computers can read and interpret relationships, understand context, not just keywords, facilitate intelligent agents and automation. This vision is being realized through technologies like RDF, Resource Description Framework, Sparkle, Query Language, OL, Web Ontology Language. These are core to Solid, allowing data to interconnect meaningfully across platforms. Imagine medical apps sharing your allergy history securely with hospitals, financial apps autofilling forms based on trusted data, educational tools adapting to your learning style using open data structures. This is Web 3.0 with purpose. Solid's expansion, building the ecosystem. Tim's startup Inrupt is now partnering with national governments to implement digital identity and data control, Fortune 500 companies to integrate Solid-based privacy tools, nonprofits and civic organizations to promote data rights. Examples: Flanders, Belgium is rolling out a Solid-based data infrastructure for all citizens. In the UK, pilots are underway for Solid-powered job-seeking and healthcare apps. Tim's hope is to create a Solid web where you don't log in with Facebook, you don't accept cookie pop-ups, you don't lose control of your data the moment you use a service. Instead, you grant access and revoke ITON your terms, the ethical stack. Tim believes that future web architecture must include a built-in ethical framework. His proposed ethical stack includes technology layer, interoperability, open standards, accessible code, legal layer, data protection laws, privacy guarantees, social contract layer, cultural norms, transparency, human-centered design, agency layer, tools that let users assert and protect their rights This stack ensures that human values are engineered into digital systems. Global digital rights advocacy. Tim continues to speak to UN councils about digital inequality, EU regulators about algorithmic transparency, African tech leaders about equitable access. He has called for a digital bill of rights, a universal web access guarantee, international data standards treaties. He sees the web not as a Western invention, but as a shared global resource that must reflect diverse cultures and needs. AI, algorithms, and accountability. As AI begins to shape the web, Tim has grown more vocal about algorithmic bias, deepfakes, and misinformation. Data monopolies feeding unethical AI. He advocates for transparent algorithmic systems, auditable AI training data, open source AI tools. Tim is not anti-AI, he's pro-accountability. AI without ethics is just another form of exploitation. Training the next generation. Tim believes that the web's future lies in education. He supports and teaches in MIT's Computer Science and AI Lab, Oxford's Department of Computer Science, online courses, and open data institutes. He champions ethical tech curricula, student-led innovation, cross-disciplinary training, e.g., combining law, design, and code. He often tells students, don't just build what's possible, build what's responsible. Preparing for the unknown. Tim doesn't claim to know exactly what the web will become. He acknowledges the complexity of balancing freedom and safety, the rise of authoritarian censorship, the tension between innovation and regulation, but he believes in the resilience of an informed, engaged digital citizenry. He sees hope in grassroots developers, localized web infrastructure, youth movements for online freedom. The web is us. For Tim, the web is not just technology, it's a reflection of us. If the web is broken, it's because we broke it. If the web is beautiful, it's because we made it that way. He leaves us with a challenge to build, protect, and evolve the web with values intact. To remember that freedom online is fragile. To never stop asking, who controls this and should they? Conclusion: the man who gave the web to the world. In the history of civilization, a few inventions have altered the human experience so profoundly that everything before and after feels like two different worlds. The printing press, the electric grid, the airplane, and the World Wide Web. And among those who changed the course of humanity, Sir Tim Berners-Lee stands as a singular figure, not because he built the web, but because he gave it away. A gift to humanity. Tim could have become one of the wealthiest men on earth. He could have patented the web, licensed it, or turned it into a walled empire. But he didn't, because for him, the web was never his to own. You can't patent the alphabet. You can't charge people to speak. Tim Berners-Lee. Instead, he chose to steward it, to protect it, to share it with billions. He chose service over status. A legacy beyond invention. Tim Berners-Lee's legacy is not just HTML, HTTP, URLs, solid pods, W3, C standards. His true legacy is in how we think about the web, respect data and privacy, define freedom in the digital age. He gave us tools? Yes, but more importantly, he gave us a framework for ethical innovation. He showed that technology must serve people, progress must include everyone, simplicity can change the world. Lessons from his life. 1. Build with purpose. Tim never chased trends or money. He built with intention to solve real human problems. 2. Stay humble. Despite his global fame, Tim remained quiet, curious, and collaborative. 3. Think long-term. He planned for decades, not quarters. Solid, W3, C, and the semantic web are long arcs of vision. 4. Empower others. Tim built systems where everyone could contribute, not just consume. 5. Protect what you create. When others exploited the web, he returned to defend it with policy, education, and new technologies. The final message. If Tim Berners-Lee had one final message for the world, it might be this: the web is what we make it, every day, with every link, with every post, with every decision to build open, fair, and inclusive systems. As we step further into an age of artificial intelligence, immersive worlds, and quantum computing, the story of Tim Berners-Lee remains a guiding light. He is not merely an inventor. He is a teacher, a visionary, a defender of rights, a builder of futures. And most of all, he is a reminder that one person, guided by integrity and empathy, can change the world, not by owning it, but by giving it away.